Hello, everyone, and welcome to Big Jeff's Football Insights every Thursday on the Big Ten Huddle. And we are presented and brought to you by FanDuel, part of the Believe Podcasting Network. I am your host, Big Jeff McMichael, of course. This is pre-recorded earlier on Thursday, as we're going to continue to do for the foreseeable future. Just a reminder, please like the podcast for us and forward it. Subscribe to the Big Ten Huddle. Our goal is always to provide comprehensive coverage of every Big Ten team in an unbiased way. I have another really compelling special topic to cover today. I'll get to that in a minute. But first, as I've done the past few weeks, I wanted to give kind of a personal update on my son's football season. So he's a junior wide receiver for our local Centennial High School. We're in Division 4A in Georgia, so that's the third highest. And last Friday, Halloween night, they needed to win their final game of the season to make the playoffs, and they got it done. They had a 35-10 victory. Afterwards, they let the students storm the field, and even the parents ran out there. So it was a really cool thing. What you're seeing on the left there is a picture of my son. You know, he had an injury earlier in the year, so he missed the first half of the season, but just very excited to be playing and making the playoffs. So we are 4 seeds. So a week from Friday, we'll play a 1 seed in Georgia. Basically, each class has 32 teams. So it's going to be a tough game, but it's really cool, exciting for the parents. The kids were super pumped up, and it was a lot of fun rushing out on the field like that. So let me talk about the agenda for this week. Number one, I'm going to review my Week 10 picks and insights from those, the 5 games I predicted. Number two, I've been presenting some special topics each week, and this week, this one's a pretty cool one. It's how does the Big Ten versus the SEC comparison narrative change if instead of the AP Top 25 was used, if you use the ESPN SP Plus that Bill Connolly does for ESPN, if you use that top 25 pool, how would that change the narrative? And I have some statistics to show that it really would dramatically change the narrative. That's the second topic. Third thing is just as some general insights I'll have for each week. I did want to give my commentary on the playoff rankings that were released on Tuesday night for the first rankings. And then finally, for my Week 11 Big Jeff's picks, that's the fourth topic and the last topic. I'm going to change things up a little this week, though. Instead of analyzing 5 games per week, I think it's maybe a little bit too redundant with what Zach and JR do usually on their Thursday show. They cover all the games and speak to them. So now I'm going to make it just 2 games I'm going to analyze. So I'm going to have what I call the Big Ten game of the week, the game I view as the best, most compelling game. And then my Lock City pick, which is the game I've been choosing each week where I say, this is the one I'm most confident in covering and predicting the winner against the spread. So that's the agenda for this week. So let me bring up that first table here to talk to the first topic. And that's how I did in Week 10. So for the 4th straight week, I finished 3-2. It actually moves me to 2 games over 500. So I'm 26-24 on the year. My Lock City picks, doing really well in that. I'm 5-2. I won my Lock City pick. It was the Purdue against Michigan game. I'm 5-2 in Lock City picks against the spread. So that's really cool. And really, I've gone 3-2 6 of the past 7 weeks. So worked really hard to get over 500. You know, a lot of people, it's hard to choose these games. I think Joel Klatt on his show said against the spread, he was 19-28. And this is a guy that's, you know, that's all he does is go to the games and everything. And so he even struggled with the picks. But so yeah, let's speak to first, what I always like to do is talk about what I got wrong in Week 10. So the first game to talk about there, and it's the row there in brown, the Penn State game. So Penn State was getting 20.5 points from Ohio State. I thought the Buckeyes would win by 17. And I had the Penn State scoring 14, which they ended up scoring. The only problem is, Ohio State was a little bit more prolific on offense than I thought, and they end up winning by 24. Too many big pass plays given up for Penn State. I thought despite all Penn State's struggles, given former Ohio State defensive coordinator Jim Knowles and his inside knowledge of the team, and this is kind of their last chance to really show maybe we can make something of the season. And maybe it's not the last chance, but it was a big stage to do it. I just really felt Penn State was going to give their best effort. And frankly, in the first half, they did play well. They were only down 3 at halftime, helped by Ohio State turnover a little bit. But the other factor is, too, I felt that Penn State's defensive ends, denied Dennis Sutton and Chaz Coleman, would get some pressure on Julian Sayin, and that would disrupt the Ohio State passing attack. And in fact, Penn State, while they might not have had a lot of sacks, they did get a lot of pressure on Julian Sayin. But his pocket presence and quick release is just really amazing for a first-year starter. So he had 300 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, and only 3 incompletions. That performance vaulted him. Frankly, he's now the current FanDuel Heisman Trophy favorite. So he's at plus 150. Second is Fernando Mendoza of Indiana at plus 240. And then Ty Simpson for Alabama is at plus 390. He's kind of like the third favorite. So evaluators really gushing over saying, the big thing with Penn State, I guess the takeaway, that defense, amazed again how mediocre they are, given that really all during James Franklin's tenure, they were always really good and consistent. They gave up 480 yards to the Buckeyes, and now their defense rates just 10th in the Big Ten in total defense and in scoring defense. So that's just a shocker to me. The second game I got wrong. I was believing USC would win at Nebraska by more than 6.5. They only won by 4, 21-17. Their passing game really struggled. Jaden Maiava, 9 of 23 for 135 yards and an interception. That poor performance from Maiava, not a total shock, though. This matchup matched the Big Ten leading, in fact, the nation's leading pass offense in USC, going against Nebraska's pass defense, which rated second best in the nation. And I'd wondered how good is that Husker pass defense, because they really didn't face that great of passing offenses. But really, this game showed that that pass defense is no fluke. The other thing is, something I had to give here. This game, USC was 1-6 record in the Big Ten on the road, and then 1-4 when traveling east. So winning in a tough environment like this, even though USC didn't cover, it's still impressive that USC was able to get this win. On the other side, Nebraska was looking to break a 28-game losing streak against AP top 25 teams. Now that's 29 straight. I guess on the good side, even though they lost by 1 score, they're still 3-2 in 1-score games. So that bodes well for the future, that even though they lost this one, Nebraska is playing better in closer games. Big blow, though. Nebraska is now 6-3. Dylan Raiola out for the season. Getting to 8 or 9 wins now is going to be much harder for Nebraska, given the backup quarterback TJ Lateef really struggled in this game. Now, he didn't have a chance to prepare and probably get all the reps in practice. So let's not, write off Nebraska quite yet. But I really think they're going to have to lean on Emmett Johnson much more. In this game, he ran for 165 yards. He's first in the Big Ten in rushing, second in the nation. So he's maybe one of the most underrated players in the Big Ten, frankly, given the numbers he's putting up. For USC at 6-2, they remain in the playoff hunt. And I definitely feel if they win out and go 10-2, their schedule will look pretty good. I really feel they'll be in the 12-team field. So what did I get right in Week 10? Those are the rows in green. First, I took Illinois to cover. They were giving 12.5 points to Rutgers. They won easily at home by 22 points, 35-13. Illinois moved to 6-3 on the year. dominated the game, outgaining Rutgers 445 to 312. Really well-balanced attack. And Illinois is who I thought they were in the preseason. A very well-coached, legit top 25 team. I just never felt they were top 10, and they did get in the top 10 before they played Indiana. I think they can get back in the top 25 in the AP poll. They have games left versus Maryland, Wisconsin, and Northwestern. So could be looking at, a 9-3 season, top 25 finish. That would be awesome for Illinois. For Rutgers, they just can't run the ball. Only had 59 yards rushing in this game. They're just too reliant on the pass offense. And at 4-5, Rutgers is going to need to find 2 wins to make a bowl game. So they have versus Maryland, at Ohio State, and versus Penn State. So they're really going to have to beat Maryland and Penn State to get to the 6 wins for a bowl game. Second game I got right. I took Indiana to outscore Maryland by more than 21.5. I had Indiana winning by 25. Turned out they won by 45. So really it brings Maryland's losing streak to 4 games. Relatively slow start for Indiana. Fernando Mendoza threw an interception, but the Hoosiers are just playing like a machine. Their running game has been so impressive. They ran for 367 yards in this game. That's 7.1 yards per carry against a pretty good Maryland defense. So Indiana's run offense now, they're first in the Big Ten, 6th in the nation at 246 yards per game. And they've got 2 running backs over 600 yards, Kaylon Black and Ryan Hemby. And then this freshman, Kobe Martin, really impressed me as well. He's got 368 yards. So they're the real deal. They're deep and they run it well. IU won the turnover battle 5-1. Now, coming in this game, Maryland entered the game 2nd in the nation at a +11 turnover margin. So Indiana really reversed that. Obviously, that was one of the big reasons for the blowout. Maryland 4-4, still chance to make a bowl. They have winnable games that include Rutgers and Michigan State. So hopefully they can get that to get a badly needed bowl game for Mike Locksley. Final game I got right. My Lock City pick of taking Purdue, 21.5 points they're getting from Michigan. They only lost by 5, 21-16. So that's the positive. They're playing competitive. They're way more competitive than last year. That's the good news. But the reality is this is the 14th straight loss in Big Ten play for Purdue. Their remaining games against Ohio State, at Washington, and then home versus Indiana. They're likely to have that losing streak reach 17 and finish 2-10. It's a real shame. The good thing, it's the first year they are making progress. I do like what I've seen from Purdue. They just have a brutal schedule, to be frank. For Michigan, really disappointing performance overall, despite running the ball well. Bryce Underwood, 13 of 22, 145 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception. Per ESPN, Underwood now ranks 11th in the Big Ten as far as quarterback ratings. He, per PFF, has him 15th in Big Ten quarterback offense grades. So, that's a little bit disappointing given the hype, but I wouldn't be too worried about. I talk about it a lot. First-year starting quarterbacks tend to struggle. It's not a given, right? I mean, Julian Sain's doing it, but he is a redshirt freshman, so it's a little different. But the good news for Michigan, they're 7-2, and everything's right there for them. If they win out, including, of course, finishing at home against Ohio State, if they beat the number 1 Buckeyes, I think at 10-2, that's going to be enough for them to make the playoffs, make the 12-team field. So a lot to play for the Wolverines. All right, so let's get to my special topic here. This is the second of 4 topics. So this is, how does the Big Ten versus SEC, in comparing the two conferences, how would the narrative change if we use the ESPN SP Plus top 25 rankings instead of the AP top 25 poll? So really the background, as Big Ten fans know, supporters of the SEC by definition, they try to downplay how good the Big Ten is. They love to tout how deep and tough the SEC is based on, and really they use as one of the talking points how many ranked teams SEC teams play versus Big Ten teams, and then they contrast that with Big Ten teams don't play that many top 25 teams. Therefore, it proves how deep we are and how the Big Ten teams are overrated. This is really frustrating for Big Ten fans. Zach and JR talk about it a lot, but the AP poll, we believe as Big Ten fans is very flawed, has a lot of built-in biases. I know just the AP poll is very slow to change their perceptions on teams, even within a year, but year to year that happens. And the last couple of years, you could tell the sports writers still view for the AP poll that the SEC is superior to the Big Ten teams, and they give them the benefit of the doubt. So what if we looked at a different poll to better judge things? And that's what I've done here. So just staying with, though, this table, on the left is the AP poll, and on the right is this week's ESPN SP Plus Top 25 poll. The AP poll has 9 SEC teams in the top 25, but only 6 Big Ten teams. And so you're going to see the Big Ten teams are in the green rows for those who can view this, and the SEC teams are in brown. So the 6 AP top 25 teams are number 1, Ohio State, number 2, Indiana, number 6, Oregon, number 20, USC, number 21, Michigan, and number 24, Washington. So let's look, though, now at the SP Plus Top 25. That has also 9 SEC teams, so that stays the same. In fact, it's the exact same teams that are ranked between both polls, the same 9 teams for the SEC. But the Big Ten for the SP Plus has 9 teams in it, so equal with the SEC. Now, something to keep in mind as we look at these teams I'm going to talk to, the SP Plus model is a statistical model, and it does factor in things like last year's results, but as the season goes along, that's weighted way less and less. And then things like, statistically, how well teams are playing, even within games, game control, and other variables like that. So the SP Plus is not perfect. But I believe it is better, less flawed than the AP poll, and it is statistically based. So I just think it's a good one to use as a barometer here. SP Plus, just to highlight for the Big Ten, the top 3 are Ohio State 1, Indiana 2, and Oregon 3. Really supports the belief that the top 10 of the Big Ten really is better than the SEC and better than any other conference. Let's look at the other SP Plus teams, though, in the Big Ten. You got USC coming in at number 12, so way higher than the AP poll where they're number 20. Iowa is number 17. They're not even ranked in the AP poll, which is really ridiculous and pretty stupid, right? I mean, Iowa's played really well. They're the only team that has given Indiana a good game, losing by just 5. So that really kind of shows how, the AP poll is very biased against the Big Ten, in my view. Washington also appears at number 19, and then Michigan at number 21. Now let's talk about some surprises in the Big Ten. Penn State is rated still number 22, believe it or not, with a 3-5 record. Illinois is number 25 for a 6-3 record. That's believable, though, right? Illinois played some really tough teams, so that one makes sense to me. Outside of the Big Ten, another surprise, Florida State appears at number 24. They have a 4-4 record. And this is just where statistically, based on that model Connolly uses, those teams are good enough to include in the top 25. It is surprising. I mean, Penn State, other than Ohio State, they've lost really close games, right? The Iowa game, they easily could have won. In game control, I've seen stats. Penn State's been very unlucky. They definitely should have a better record than 3-5. I think that partially explains why they're there, although it would seem like they shouldn't be in the top 25. Okay, so let's look at the impact of using the SP plus top 25 versus the AP. And I'm going to show a different table here I'm going to bring up. All right. Oh, okay, not a table yet. But see, I wanted to speak to this as far as the impact for the Big Ten. So if you use the AP top 25 for the Big Ten, every team plays 12 games. So that's 216 games total. Based on the AP top 25, 62 of them, or almost 29% of Big Ten games will be against top 25 ranked teams. On the other hand, if you go with the SP plus top 25, where there's 9 Big Ten teams, the number of Big Ten teams that are Big Ten games involving top 25 teams jumps to 40.7%. So again, 28.7% for AP, 40.7% for the SP plus top 25. So that means if you're using SP plus, it really greatly increases the number of top 25 teams Big Ten teams are playing. And then let's look at the impact of this with another table here, and speak to how that would change the narrative. So there's a lot of information here, so I'm going to try to summarize this. To simplify things, I try to take the top 5 ranked teams in the playoff rankings for each conference, meaning the Big Ten Conference and SEC only. I'm leaving out the other conferences because this is really a debate between who's better, the Big Ten or the SEC. So the top 5 playoff ranked teams are Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon, USC, and Iowa. So I used them and plugged them and basically looked up how many of their 12-game schedule, how many top 25 opponents would they have played using the AP poll. And that reveals that 14 of the 60 games being played by those top 5 teams, 23% are against top 25 teams according to the AP poll. If you take those same 5 teams and assume SP plus top 25, that jumps to 40% of those top 5 teams are playing SP plus top 25 rated teams. Hopefully you're following me on that. But the ratio of top 25 teams being played jumps from 23% to 40% for the 5 best teams in the Big Ten. That's just such a huge difference. Okay. Now, if you look at the SEC, it's more simple, right? Because the 9 teams in the AP top 25 for the SEC are the exact same teams in the SP plus poll. So for that, 20 of 60 games for those top 5 SEC teams are against top 25 opponents, whether you're looking at the AP poll or the SP plus. So that turns out to be 33%. So Texas A&M, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, and Texas, those are the top 5 playoff committee rated teams. Those teams, 33% of their games are against top 5 or top 25 opponents per SP plus. That lags behind the Big Ten, where our top 5 teams have 40% of their games. So this just demonstrates to you how if we had a different poll than the AP poll, all those talking points and arguments of, yeah, you guys, you're not playing a tough schedule because you're not playing many top 25 teams versus us, that would change dramatically. And if you really took a step back, both conferences have the same number of SP plus top 25 teams. The SEC does play 1 less conference game. I didn't do the numbers for all the teams, and maybe I'll do that next week. I kind of ran out of time. It takes a lot to get these numbers. But, the Big Ten does have 2 more teams. The SEC plays 1 less conference game. But I bet you it would shake out to be about equal, that really both conferences are playing a similar number of top 25 teams. I strongly think that would be the case if we ran those numbers. So let's look at a couple other highlights from this table. So among the 5, top playoff rated teams by the committee, what is the team that has the hardest schedule based on top 25 opponents? This shows USC. 6 of USC's 12 opponents are in the SP plus top 25. So half their games are against top 25 opponents. If it were the AP poll, only 4 of 12 it is. So that really changes things for them. Ohio State and Oregon are second here. They basically, per SP plus, 5 of their 12 games are against top 25 teams. And then Indiana and Iowa, they're going to have 4 games each, so 33% of their games. If you look at the SEC, really Alabama and Georgia have the hardest schedule from this perspective. 5 of their 12 games would be against SP plus 25 ranked teams. That comes to 42% of their schedule is against top 25 teams. So here's an interesting question. Who has the toughest schedule in both conferences based on how many top 25 teams you face looking at the SP plus? Really, it's Wisconsin. No surprise. We've been saying this all along. It's crazy how tough their schedule is. They are playing, of their 12 games, 8 of the 12, 8 of them are against SP plus top 25 teams. If you looked at just the AP poll, it's 6 of 12, but it jumps to 8 of 12 for SP plus. So it just shows you how crazy that schedule is. And really, it's frankly, why Wisconsin is having patience with Luke Fickell. He's had those injuries to the quarterbacks. He's playing a brutal schedule. Their schedule last year was really tough. So I think that's why they're giving him slack. Now, for the SEC, everyone's talked about Florida's schedule, and you're seeing that at the bottom of the table, by the way. I do think they have the toughest SEC schedule, but really not as tough as Wisconsin for this metric. So 7 in their 12 games, 7 of them are against SP plus top 25 ranked teams. That comes to 58%. So, no doubt, very tough schedule for Florida, but really not as tough as Wisconsin, especially with them, playing Alabama, adding them to their schedule. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Again, the bottom line here is the AP poll really does a disservice. I think that's why, JR and Zach get super excited in a negative way about that poll. I get it. Many other people do. I'm kind of like, I don't think the committee is going to rely on that, and it shakes out in the end, but it is annoying. It gives talking points to Peter Burns and the SEC talking heads that really are deceptive for sure. And this data reveals that. All right, let me back out here and take a sip of water. And we're going to get to our third topic. I just wanted to provide kind of my insights on the first playoff rankings. I know JR and Zach did a great job of covering that earlier this week. So you can see on the left here, I have all the rankings, all the teams, again, Big Ten teams in green cells. The SEC teams are in brown. The light blue is basically for the Big 12 teams, and then the ACC are in dark blue. Notre Dame is the independent in white there. I do have as well the difference from the AP poll, so plus or minus in range. So, for example, Oregon at ranked 9th, that's 3 spots worse than the AP poll. They're ranked 6th in the AP, so the committee didn't have them quite as high. We're going to speak to that in a second here. So just specific to the Big Ten, at the top, Ohio State is 1, Indiana 2. There's a strong argument both ways. I've seen a lot of statistics where one team looks better than the other. It will work itself out in the end. I think eye test is a big thing here. I think when you see some of the look of Ohio State's athletes, like an Arvell Reese, and obviously Jeremiah Smith, you just say, good Lord, how do we play against these guys? Just out of interest, FanDuel, does have odds out, assuming, as of now, assuming Indiana would have faced Ohio State in a neutral site, which they would in the Big Ten championship game. They have Ohio State as a 3.5-point favorite. Really, that's, pretty respectful, I think, of Indiana, because every other team Ohio State would be playing, it'd be higher than that. Even Alabama and A&M, even though I don't have that figure. Again, Iowa's in this poll, just like in the SP Plus. Iowa is ranked 20th here. They're not in the AP poll, which is a crime. Really, they're rightfully should be in the top 25. I think they should be higher than that, frankly, but it's good to see them there. I mentioned Oregon at 9. Some think they're getting screwed. I think the problem is, Penn State, I still think that was a big win because at the time, Penn State still was playing with reasonable confidence, but it's just not holding up well. And to date, Oregon's only played one team with a winning record, and that's Northwestern. Their strength of schedule to date is the worst in the Big Ten. It ranks 74th in the nation and worst in the Big Ten. So the good news for Oregon, though, they've got big games upcoming. This week versus Iowa, we're going to be covered. I'm going to talk to that game. That's one of the predictions. USC and Washington. So they've got plenty of chance to move up. If they win out, they will move up for sure. Don't worry about that. Also, I believe all 7 of these Big Ten teams in here, if they end up with 2 losses or less, I think they're all going to get in except maybe Washington. And it does depend on many factors. Washington, they might end up with only 2 top 25 wins versus Illinois and Oregon. So that schedule might not look that favorable for them. And the reality, too, is there's not room for everybody. So there's only going to be room for 4 at the max Big Ten teams. Probably looking at 4 SEC teams, maybe 5, but we'll see how that shakes out. Miami's second loss really was a major hit for the ACC. Their highest ranked team is Virginia at number 14. Really looking like a one-bid league. This really supports one of my key mantras is for conferences to be doing to maximize, their potential. You need your blue buds to be playing like blue buds, and Clemson, Florida State definitely are not, and then Miami's struggling. So that really is hurting the ACC. Big 12 is in a good position, though. They have 2 teams in the top 10, BYU and Texas Tech. Utah's ranked number 13. I think they're headed for maybe 2 playoff teams. That would be great for them. And then just the only other major issues I have, I don't love Notre Dame at number 10 with 2 losses. Never had a problem with them getting ranked quickly after losing those 2 close games, but I feel they need some more winning to bring them up to number 10. We'll see how that shakes out. I also, Tennessee with 3 losses, they're at number 25. To me, Cincinnati, I'd rather see them at 25 versus a 3-loss Tennessee. But again, I think things will work themselves in the end. What I would like to see most, frankly, is so that we're not talking about hypothetical matchups. I would like to see as many SEC versus Big Ten matchups. And unfortunately, the way the playoff brackets laid out, it wasn't getting many, not just first rounds, but second round matchups. We were getting a potential like Oregon if they win round 1 playing Ohio State. So I don't like to see that, but no need to get bent out of shape over it because we know things will be changing. In the end, it's going to look a lot different. But I didn't have any big issues. I think in general, the committee does a pretty darn good job. It's just, it does seem like the criteria sometimes it's hard to interpret what they're giving the most weight for would be, I guess, my big takeaway. All right, let me get a drink of water here, and we're going to get to our last topic. All right. So this week we have 7 Big Ten games. And as I talked about, just to kind of maybe shorten the podcast a little and also not to be redundant with JR and Zach, these 7 games here, I'm going to choose 2 of them to cover in detail. So I'm not going to cover USC is at home, a 14.5-point favorite over Northwestern. You have Ohio State on the road at Purdue, a 29.5-point favorite. Rutgers at home, a 1.5 favorite over Maryland. You got number 24 Washington, an 11.5-point favorite at Wisconsin, and then UCLA at home, a 2.5-point favorite over Nebraska. So not covering those games, but two of them as one-score spreads. This actually, other than the Ohio State game, the spreads are a little bit better than they've been in prior weeks, I think, which is good for the Big Ten. So I'm going to be covering, though, what we have highlighted in green. I'm first going to cover Oregon, who's a -6.5-point favorite over Iowa, and that's my Big Ten game of the week. And then my Lock City pick of the week is going to be looking at the Indiana being a 15.5-point favorite over Penn State at Happy Valley. All right, so let's talk to the Big Ten game of the week. Oregon, 6.5-point favorite over Iowa. The over-under is 43.5 according to FanDuel, and all these spreads are per FanDuel, our sponsor. That is not surprisingly the lowest. Actually, it's tied for lowest in the Big Ten as far as an over-under. UCLA and Nebraska is also at the same figure. Both teams are coming off bye weeks. This is a huge clash at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on CBS. So that group has had a mixed bag of games. They've had some big blowouts. I think they had the Indiana game last week, unfortunately. So this should be a great one. Oregon comes in 7-0. 7 and they're 6 and I had that wrong. I had them 7-0. I wrote that wrong. They are 6-1, I believe. 4-1 in the Big Ten. Of course, they're so lost to Indiana in week 7. And then since they won at Rutgers and Wisconsin, huge game for Oregon in multiple ways. This would keep up their slim hopes to make the Big Ten championship game. But more important, like I talked about earlier, given Penn State's last 5 games in a row, they really, it leaves Oregon without a single ranked win. So this would be a ranked win over number 20 per the playoff rankings, Iowa. So that's a pretty big deal. Their remaining strength of schedule is 11th toughest in the nation, and includes against number 20 USC and number 24 Washington. So again, they went out. Their strength of schedule is going to look much, much better. Iowa comes in 6-2 overall, 4-1 in the Big Ten. Beyond Ohio State and Indiana, I think they're playing the best in the Big Ten. Iowa is over the past 5 weeks. They've won 3 in a row, and their last game was a 41-3 dismantling at home of Minnesota 2 weeks ago. Just looking against the spread, always interesting. For the year, Oregon is 5-3 against the spread, but they've not covered 2 of the past 3 weeks. Iowa is 5-2-1 against the spread. That's notable, right? 5-2-1, and they've covered. Iowa has 5 of the last 6 games, and it really speaks to how well they've been playing. So as I always like to do, for Oregon, let's give 3 reasons why Oregon can cover the 6.5 points on the road. Number 1, so Oregon is one of the few Big Ten teams, I've said this before, but it bears repeating, who has not struggled traveling multiple time zones east to play a conference game. They have a 6-0 record over the past 2 seasons under Dan Lanning when traveling east. So last year, they were 3-0. They beat Purdue, Michigan, and Wisconsin. This year, Oregon won at Northwestern by 20. They had the overtime game, of course, against Penn State, won by 6. And then they crushed Rutgers by 46. So if you look at that 6-0, record traveling east, that's an average win of 22 points. All that really demonstrates what a great staff Dan Lanning and his crew are, because it's not easy coming east, just like it's not easy for the East teams traveling west. If Oregon doesn't cover this, I really don't think it's going to be from travel reasons. Number 2 reason to like Oregon. Their front 4 on defense is really highly rated, And their statistics for the year and then individual game performance really show they're very capable of holding Iowa's rushing attack, which they're relying on because they're not good again throwing the ball. If they hold that in check, that's going to limit Iowa's scoring. So going deeper on that, Pro Football Focus, all 4 Oregon starting defensive linemen ranked very well overall. They're in the top 24 of all Big Ten defensive linemen. And in fact, 3 of the 4 Oregon defensive linemen rate in the top 13 when it comes to run defense. So this is going to be a great matchup of the elite Iowa offensive line that I'm going to speak to in a little bit. Oregon, they're number 1 in Big Ten pass defense, and they appear good but not great against the run. So Oregon ranks 8th in the Big Ten against the run. But really, some of that's reflective of how many great run defenses the Big Ten has. Because if you look at the stats, Oregon's only giving up 115 yards per game. They give up 3.34 yards per carry. That is not a lot. That's a good defense. So, their numbers, despite being 8th in the Big Ten, really are quite good. If you look at individual games, that supports it as well. Indiana has the number 1 rated Big Ten run offense. Oregon held them to 111 yards and only 3 yards a carry. Northwestern has the 5th best rated run offense. Oregon gave up 178 yards, but it's deceiving. It included a 79-yard run, and I hate to say, take out one run, but if you did take out that one run, it's more like 99 rushing yards, less than 3 yards a carry. So the point is, Oregon is equipped to potentially stop or slow down that Iowa running attack. And then number 3, while the Iowa defense is great, Oregon is probably the most balanced offense in the Big Ten. They're 2nd in scoring, have a great quarterback with many weapons. It's going to be extremely tough for Iowa, as good as they are on defense, to hold them in check. So if we go deeper on that, Oregon averages 41 points a game. Talked about the balance, 247 yards a game passing, 237 rushing yards a game, almost the same. They're 2nd in the Big Ten, in fact, in rushing. So that's the kind of balance that Joel Klatt likes to say. Oregon has answers. If you want to try to take away the run, they can throw the ball. If you want to take away the pass, they can run it. So, whatever you're looking to do. And then Dante Moore been excellent. He ranks as the 3rd best Big Ten quarterback per ESPN's QB rating metric. 19 TDs, 4 interceptions. Indiana is really the only team that contained Oregon, holding them to 20 points. I'm going to give Oregon forgiveness when they scored 21 against Wisconsin. That was not in the greatest weather. So, all right, let's talk Iowa. What are 3 reasons why Iowa can cover here? Just in general, and I've alluded to this, I think just Iowa's an underrated team at 6-2 overall. When you think about that Indiana game, a 42-yard missed field goal in the 4th quarter, Mark Gronowski got hurt. So whenever you go that second quarterback, it's a big drop-off. And then Indiana needed a late drive and a late, touchdown pass to the 49-yard pass to Elijah Sherratt to pull that game off. So Iowa, can you imagine if they're 7-1, what the difference in the talking points? And they were so close to being 7-1 and having a much significant change in the narrative. And then, we talked about them covering so many games recently, blowing out rivals like Wisconsin by 37, Minnesota by 38. This team is good and getting better. Number 2 reason to like Iowa, the closest team to Oregon's balanced offense that Iowa has played, it was Indiana. Indiana had the 2nd best Big Ten offense, and Iowa held the Hoosiers to 337 total yards. Hoosiers averaged over 500 yards, and Iowa held them to 337. Indiana averages over 40 points a game. Iowa held them to 20. So this really kind of, Iowa's offense is that kind of well-balanced, similar to Oregon attack. And, it provides evidence that Iowa maybe can contain the Ducks as well. I talked about how Indiana had the best run offense and everything. And Iowa held Indiana specifically in rushing to only 104 total yards rushing. That's 2.7 yards per carry. And then just statistically, Iowa's defense is excellent. They're second in the nation and in the Big Ten, only behind Ohio State in total defense, 235 yards per game. So Iowa's like right up there in nationally. They have the third best Big Ten run defense. They only allow 84 yards per game. And again, that's up against Oregon's second best running offense. And the pass defense is really good as well, ranked fourth in the Big Ten. And that's, behind Norm Parker's vaunted zone pass defense. That pass defense, sixth in the nation, third in the Big Ten in passing efficiency defense. So Iowa across the board ranks really high. There's no glaring weaknesses is the bottom line in the Iowa defense. And if you look at Pro Football Focus, all 11 starters rank in the green. If you're familiar with PFF, they have a green status, which means you're well above the average for your position. And all 11 starters are that for Iowa. So number 3, behind the statistically best Big Ten offensive line for Iowa, and despite the Big Ten's worst passing offense, they've been able to consistently run the ball well. And their scoring average is actually better than you think, 9th in the Big Ten. And so that provides evidence that they can put points up even on a good defense like Oregon. So let's talk more to that offensive line. Been consistent throughout the year. PFF currently ranks all 5 Iowa line starters as top 10 in the Big Ten among offensive linemen. That's just an incredible statistics. Run blocking as well. All 5 starters rank in the top 15 in the Big Ten. And it's just a big reason why, despite being one-dimensional and other teams knowing we need to stop the run, Iowa's still 6th in the Big Ten in run in rushing. And that's 185 yards a game. And really, it's Kamari Moulton is the leader in this. He has 435 yards for the year, 5.3 yards per carry, and then he's supplemented by Mark Gronowski's running ability. He has 313 yards on the year, including 4.1 yards per carry. So just really impressive there. Iowa's ranks 123rd in the nation in pass efficiency offense. And yet, despite all that, Iowa's strong defense with the good running game and their style play, they've overcome that. They average 31 points a game. That's 9th in the Big Ten in scoring. And I just want to compare this to prior Iowa offenses. Let's talk about 2023. They averaged 15.4 points a game. That's 129th in the nation. This year, that 31 points per game average, that's 53rd in the nation. So they've doubled up the score on average than they were 2 years ago. So this is I know it's not an offense that's going to wow you, but this is way different than the terrible, Iowa defenses from the past 3 years, going 2 and 3 years back, really. So what's my call on this game? It's really going to come down to if I was able to successfully run the ball versus Oregon, because, again, they have just the Big Ten's worst pass offense. If Iowa can't run, it's going to give Oregon's prolific offense more opportunities. The more you get, the more that can wear down the Iowa defense. And then, the Ducks have the type of playmakers that can really punish them. So, that is something where there is a strong argument that the Ducks are going to be able to put up enough points if Iowa can't run the ball. And there's evidence on both sides to say whether Iowa can get it done in the run game, but that's going to be the key factor here. The other thing with this, I could tell you, weather could be a major factor. The forecast is likely for a steady rain during the day. That's perfect for Iowa's style of play. Now, don't get me wrong here. Oregon knows what it's like to play in rain. I mean, anyone familiar with the state of Oregon, they get a ton of rain. But the reality is, Oregon, with all their exceptional skill players, they would rather have ideal conditions and ideal conditions would favor Iowa. So I'm not saying Iowa's not used to playing in muck conditions. They did against Wisconsin, but let's face it, they only scored 21 against Wisconsin, won by 14. It will affect Oregon's ability to cover that 6.5. So if this were ideal conditions, I would like Oregon covering the 6.5, but it's not. So I'm taking Iowa here. I'm calling the Ducks to win in a close game by 3. I'm calling it Oregon 20, Iowa 17. I'm going to give it a fairly low confidence just because what if the weather changes here? You never know with that weather. But again, Oregon to win, but Iowa to cover. All right. Now, final game of the evening. So this is my Lock City pick of the week. It is Indiana as a 15.5 point favorite at Penn State. The over-under is 48.5 per FanDuel. Matchup of teams who are basically doing 100% role reversals here. They play in the Fox Big Noon game. Indiana comes, number 2, as we know, AP poll and in the first playoff rankings. 9-0 overall, 6-0 in the Big Ten. Just Kirk Cignetti since at Indiana, 21-2. Only 2 losses to the 2 teams that finished in the championship game last year, Notre Dame and Ohio State. So IU, of course, just whipped Maryland. If you look at the remaining schedule, this is the key game. The last 3 Big Ten opponents for Indiana have an aggregate 0-16 Big Ten record. Meanwhile, Penn State, 3-5 overall, 0-5 in the Big Ten with that 5-game losing streak. It's the first start for new quarterback Ethan Grunkemeyer at home. After his first 2 games, he had to play road losses at Iowa and Ohio State. If Penn State loses this game, they're going to go 3-6, and they're going to have to win the last 3 against Maryland, Nebraska, and at Rutgers. So really would be great if they could pull an upset here. Otherwise, they need to win 3 in a row. The record against the spread is very relevant here. Penn State 1-7 versus the spread. They only covered in that loss against Iowa. Indiana is 6-3 versus the spread, including covering 3 of their last 4 and 6 of the past 8. So definitely much better for Indiana against the spread. So let's get into 3 reasons why Indiana can cover the 15.5 points. It's a lot. Number 1, Indiana is leading the nation in scoring margin. They're basically destroying teams who are either middle of the pack or lower in the Big Ten standings. And unfortunately, that's what Penn State is. So let's go deeper on that. Penn State or Indiana, their average win is 31 points a game. Like I said, leading the nation. Number 2 is Texas Tech, for your interest, at 26.6 a game. Oregon is 3rd in winning margin at 25.1, and Ohio State 4th at 24 points per game. Big Ten games versus, Illinois, Michigan State, UCLA, and Maryland. All 4 of those have a combined 7-15 Big Ten record. So on the lower end, Indiana won by 53, 25, 50, and 45. Those 4 averaged to 43 a game. So that's why I'm saying Penn State, mediocre in the standings. Indiana has shellacked teams like this. Now, the difference is Penn State has a lot more talent than those other teams. The challenge is they're not playing up to that talent on either side of the ball. Number 2 reason to like Indiana. With a first-year starting quarterback, Penn State wants to run the ball, right? Indiana has the Big Ten's best run defense, and their front 4 is playing great. And then Penn State's offensive line playing pretty well, but they've got some weak spots. So I think that indicates Penn State is going to struggle to move the ball and thus score versus Indiana. So going deeper, Indiana's defense, really the strength of the team. 7th in the nation, 4th in the Big Ten. They give up 248 yards per game. It's the run defense that has been elite. They rank 4th in the nation, 1st in the Big Ten. Like we said, they're only giving up 80 yards per game in run defense. It really, Pro Football Focus ranks all 11 Indiana starters in that green across the board above average ranking when I say green by Pro Football Focus. So on the other hand, Penn State's offensive line has been pretty good, but they have two that rank kind of poor per PFF. It's center Nick Dawkins and right guard Anthony Dunca. They rank very average. And, when you're a team like Penn State who had high aspirations, that's not good. Certainly not a bad offensive line, but, many people thought coming in this year, Penn State might have the best offensive line in the country, or at least, in the Big Ten. Penn State's rushing attack only ninth in the Big Ten, 180 yards per game. So if Penn State can't run the ball, I don't know how they're going to score much versus IU is the bottom line. Third reason to like Indiana, their offense, second best rated in the Big Ten, well-balanced. And again, Big Ten leading rushing attack, especially it's a bad matchup. Penn State is only 14th rated in Big Ten rushing defense. So that is a bad matchup. A lot of these games are about matchups and motivation. Indiana just in general, good passing game behind Fernando Mendoza, fifth in the Big Ten there, 259 yards per game. But that run offense, like we talked about, that's sixth in the nation, 246 yards a game, 5.7 yards per carry. That stat is 10th in the nation. And then we talked about earlier, deep running back room, Kaylon Black, Roman Hembry, over 600 yards. And then this Kobe Martin, who's a freshman, he got a lot of playing time at Maryland. He's just super impressive, 7.2 yards per carry. So they have a deep room here. And then you add to it Fernando Mendoza throwing his 220 yards rushing. And that run pass option that he runs is pretty devastating. And they're not afraid to use that. They're not afraid to run Mendoza, which I don't know. When Indiana's been up by a lot, I felt that that's something that they should kind of pull back on. You don't want him getting hurt. All right, let's talk two reasons why to like Penn State. The defensive line is still very talented. We talked about how they played well against Ohio State, generating pressure. It's just that Penn State's defensive backs couldn't guard Ohio State's weapons. And then Indiana's offensive line has had some injuries to talk to. Wide receiver Elijah Sherratt might not play. He has a hamstring issue. So this could create a scenario if Sherratt is out, line issues where Penn State maybe could take away from the Indiana passing game, making them be running oriented. And that makes a team, easier to defend if you're able to do that. Just Penn State's defensive lineman, Chaz Coleman, ranks fifth among all defensive ends in defensive rankings per Pro Football Focus. Denied Dennis Sutton ranks seventh among defensive ends, so just very good. The defensive tackles haven't been good. Zane Durant only ranks 43rd among defensive tackles. But again, it's a very talented group that's capable of high-level play. Indiana, left guard Drew Evans is out. So he's been rock steady for them. They're replaced by Zen Mokowski, transfer from Ohio State. He didn't play that well at Ohio State. He's played reasonably well at Indiana, but that's a question. And then right guard Bray Lynch for Indiana all year has been a little bit questionable. So that offers hope for Penn State against a more beat up offensive line for Indiana. Number two, just the second reason, I just think maybe being at home, this is the first game that Penn State will be at home since James Franklin got fired. I think Penn State fans are really going to give this team a lift. There was a lot of negativity ever since the Oregon game with the fans. They were unsure, are we going to get this done and everything? And so the ire of the fans was really against James Franklin. I think they're really going to support this team. It's not going to be a raucous environment, but it's going to be a positive environment. I think that's going to help out the quarterback. For Penn State, you would hope that would motivate the team to say, hey, let's put together a great effort and let's pull an upset here. So I think that's a second reason really to like Penn State to cover a 15.5 point spread. I mean, with all that talent, you can't cover 15.5 points. I know Indiana's playing well, so that's just what I'm thinking. So what's my call on this one? Unfortunately, I just do think it is a bad matchup for Penn State with the redshirt freshman that they don't totally trust, Ethan Grunkemeyer, and then trying to run the ball against that elite Indiana run defense is going to be difficult. The other thing, Penn State 1-7 versus the spread. Indiana 6-3 against the spread. And Indiana's just been blowing out people in this. So, in games like this, until Indiana's level of play goes down in games like this, I'm not going to bet against them. So I'm going to take Indiana in the 15.5 points. I'm calling Indiana to win 34 to Penn State 14. This is my Lock City pick of the week, of course. I'm going to bring up the my score here to finish it off. But confidence, I got to give this high, right? If it's my Lock City pick, only choosing them to win only by 20, but it's hard to stop the Indiana train. I think if Elijah Sherrod is out, though, that would be great news for Penn State because he is their biggest weapon for sure and would make Indiana a little bit more easier to defend. So that's it for the week. Again, in the future, I'm going to analyze just 2 games and hopefully present more special topics to you. Thank you for listening to me. Please follow me on X, Big Jeff's FT Ball. Good luck to your team this week, and bye for now.